Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. We're continuing through this punk rock theology book, and last week we looked at Abraham, so today we're moving on to his son Isaac. I can barely tell Isaac's story without telling the story of Ishmael, his older brother. That starts in Genesis 16, where it says, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, 'The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her.'" Abram apparently thinks this sounds like a great idea, and he'll take one for the team and go have sex with a younger woman, and it works out about as well as you could have expected that to work out. Yeah, she gets pregnant, but it turns into a whole lot of family drama, and Ishmael is born, Abram is happy. The Bible doesn't tell us how Sarai feels about it. Skip ahead about 13 years and God appears to Abram again in Genesis 17. And he specifically says that Sarah is going to have a baby, and that son will be the one that all these promises come through. Genesis 17:17 says, "Then Abram bowed down to the ground, but he laughed to himself in disbelief." Many translations literally say he fell on his face and laughed. This is not the great man of faith. This is not a moment of faith for him at the very least. He's literally laughing at God, and he basically says, "Don't be ridiculous, just go ahead and bless Ishmael, we got this covered." And verse 19 says, "But God replied, 'No, Sarah your wife will give birth to a son for you. You will name him Isaac, and I will confirm my covenant with him and his descendants as an everlasting covenant.'" Lots of people know that that name Isaac means laughter, and in the next chapter, Sarah's around and she hears it and she laughs about it, and people so often insist that, oh, it's laughter because Sarah laughed about it, and we totally skip over the fact that Abraham laughed about it first. In the end, they both embrace the name, and after Isaac's born, Sarah comes back to it again and says, "Everybody's gonna laugh with me. Who would have ever thought that this would happen?" Because it is ridiculous for a 100-year-old man and his 90-year-old wife to have a baby. But that's exactly what God did. But unfortunately, it's not the happy ending of the story. It's just more drama, because Ishmael has been here for 13 years. He was clearly the heir. He is the firstborn son, but he was the son of the servant, not of the wife. And so he is displaced by Isaac showing up. And I think it's fair to acknowledge how harsh that is for him. It's not his fault at all, but he's being completely edged out by this newcomer. But when Sarah sees him picking on her little boy, she throws a fit and insists that Abraham just kick them out and get rid of them, which is hard for him because it's his son. He loves this kid. But God reassures him that he will be okay and he will become a nation himself. And so Abraham sends him off. A while later, the Bible doesn't make it clear how much time has passed, but God comes to Abraham another time in Genesis 22:2 and says, "Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you." God just told him to sacrifice his son as a burnt offering. 3 days later, they get to the mountain. He leaves the servants at the bottom. He and Isaac climb the mountain, and the next thing you know, Isaac is strapped to the altar. Abraham is raising the knife to slaughter him when God calls out and stops him and says, "Don't hurt him. You've proven that you trust me. Y'all can go home now." And they find a ram caught in the bushes and they sacrifice it instead. It is such a crazy story. And I don't have all the answers on this for you. But one thing that we miss up is we always picture this, that Isaac is a little boy. And it's Father Abraham strapping this helpless child to the altar and about to kill him. The ancient Jewish understanding always saw Isaac as a grown man. This happened somewhere within like a 30-year window. And we don't know his exact age, but he was carrying the wood for the sacrifice all the way up the mountains. So that means he was strong. He's not a little kid doing that. But more importantly, he's clearly a willing participant in this sacrifice. Because let's face it, his dad is 100 years older than him. Whether he is 10 or 25, he could clearly outrun the old man, probably easily overpower him, but he doesn't, because this whole thing is both of them demonstrating their trust in God's promise. That God has said he's going to make Isaac into a great nation. Isaac has no children, so his story cannot end on this mountain. They're going to do their part, and God's going to have to do his part. Abraham had learned the hard way that sooner or later God always comes through and we can trust him. You don't have to keep trying to figure it out and make sense of all of it, but trust that he will keep his promise. promises. And he has clearly raised his son to understand that as well. And to me, this is the message of Isaac's life. Isaac is held up throughout the Bible as he's one of the patriarchs. He's in Hebrews chapter 11, celebrated for his faith. He's called a prophet. Yet we never see him speaking God's word to anybody. He never works a miracle. But what he did was he lived his faith. He demonstrated his trust in God. He believed God's promise. And that is the definition of faith. His very life is a reminder of the faithfulness of God. That legacy has endured for thousands of years for us to still be talking about it today. You and I have the same potential to leave a lasting mark on the world and the people around us by simply trusting God's promises and knowing that He will always be faithful.